Hey everyone, welcome back to Beyond the Bar podcast. I'm your host Anisa Tova, and I am very excited today because we have Shannon Rogers Simpson with us today. And Shannon, she is not, she's a powerhouse attorney, family law and divorce attorney, and she's a partner at Cohn Clare Lance Greifer and Simpson, a firm in New York City. But she's not just an attorney. She has really an interesting journey that's anything but ordinary. Imagine switching from dreaming of being a doctor to becoming a top-notch lawyer. And that's while juggling a love for English literature and neuroscience. She's just a fascinating woman. We'll have to get to know her. So, Shannon, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Denise. It's lovely to be here.
Well, I'm so excited to have you and for you to share your story. I mean, you really had such a fascinating path. I mean, we spoke a little bit, but so you started wanting to be a doctor and ended up in the law. Share that story, please.
Yeah, sure. And it's something that was so long ago. I've been a lawyer for 22 years now. So it's something I don't always think about all the time, but I really enjoyed speaking to you about that part of my life because it's something that still informs the things that I'm interested in, the things that I read about, the things that I'm excited to talk to my kids about when they get home from school. So I grew up convinced that I was going to be a doctor. I went to a high school that specialized in math and science. I went to college. I was completely pre-med, and I hit my first stumbling block when I reached organic chemistry, I think second or third year of college, and it was beyond challenging. And I won't share here what grade I got, but suffice to say that put an end to my career as a doctor. And as a result of that, I had to switch what my major was going to be. And I realized when I looked around at the credits that I already had, I actually had taken enough English credits and enough science credits in the area of neuroscience that I could double major in both of those things. And it was interesting to see that even though I was so convinced that I was going to be a doctor, the classes that I had actually taken were the classes that I was really more interested in and really felt more passionate about. And so I graduated with a double major in English literature and in neuroscience. I didn't go straight to graduate school because now that I wasn't going to be a doctor, I wasn't sure what I was going to be. So I moved
Yeah.
to New York City. I worked for a couple of years, including as a paralegal in the district attorney's office. Manhattan District Attorney's Office was one of my first jobs out of college. And I said, this is exciting. I can do this. I think I'd like to do this. And I went back to law school and, fast forward 20-ish years later, and here I am.
So you double majored in English literature, neuroscience, and then you ended up as a paralegal, district attorney's office, and you found that fascinating. That seems like there's such two desperately different fields. What about that work did you find fascinating? What connection was there?
One of the things I think that I enjoy about the practice of law are there's lots of parts of it, but there's two parts of it that I find to be the most compelling. And one is kind of the storytelling and the story listening part of it, and the other part is the analytical part of it and the breaking down of it and the um, building back up again of the legal arguments. So on the storytelling and the story listening side, it's really not so different, especially in matrimonial law, from the types of things that you would read about in great works of literature. You're hearing stories about people's families, about their children, about their marriages. And as a part of that, you often hear about their own lives, the path that they traveled to get to where they are today. And then, of course, in order to effectively advocate for that person, you need to be able to communicate their story to a court, to opposing counsel, sometimes even through opposing counsel to their spouse, often at a time when there hasn't been a real meeting of those stories in the past between the two of them. So I think that part satisfies the part of me that's interested in literature and creativity and storytelling. And then, of course, in the law, you have the analytical part of it. What's the law? How does it apply to this situation? What case sites are relevant here? Can I make that argument? This is a new argument. Can I make that? And that's really the more scientific or mathematical part of it, which is almost like you're building a house or building a creation out of Legos. You're taking the pieces and putting them together in a way that you have to have good foundation, and you go from there. So I think actually it does kind of put together both of my interests, surprisingly, but truly.
That's why you are such a successful, and it's like such a smart and humane and practical approach to really helping families go through this very difficult process that is filled with so many emotions. And it's not just, on the client side, obviously, but oftentimes, the other practitioners, right? It's almost like you put a piece of yourself into in that process and absorb it. And I love how you described it as storytelling, because it's almost like, imagine your story was on a 8 by 10 piece of paper, and then you fold it like 4 times, and that is the fraction of what gets to the courts, the judge, essentially, to make a decision that will impact the rest of your life. So to have somebody like you to carry that story, to represent it in a way that needs to be represented, that is fascinating.
Thank you. Thank you. It's that's very well said about the piece of this that ends up getting presented to the court. And I think at the beginning of a case, well, look, cases run the gamut. Some are amicable from the get-go. Some have some bumps at the beginning and get to a place of amicability, or at least not unfriendly resignation. And then there's other parts that really go all the way to trial. But I think in the main, at the beginning, there's often a desire for there to be a third party arbiter of the story. Let's get this in front of the judge, and the judge will decide that I'm right. And of course, both sides think that. I'm gonna present my side of this to the judge, and the judge is gonna say I'm right. And our courts are they're not in the business of doing that. They're not in the business of listening to two people tell their version of what happened and making a proclamation about which one of them is right. They are there to apply the law to the facts that they have in front of them. And there are very serious legal issues that need to go before a court. But I think in terms of feeling that sort of vindication and feeling that your story has been heard often comes through the process outside of the courtroom. I think it comes through mediation. I think it comes through sitting down with your opposing counsel and with the client on the other side and walking through the issues in the case and how to resolve those. And as a part of that, some of the concerns that people have raised will necessarily get raised and be heard. And so usually that desire to have the part of the story that's important to my clients told is we're able to resolve that short of going to court and having a judge opine, because I'm sure you know this, it's much better for everyone if they're able to resolve their differences between themselves and not have a court make a decision.
You articulate it so well, and sometimes it's just being heard, right? It's that's all
Right.
it is. Yeah, that's it. Wow. I mean, you have there's so many parts of so many fascinating parts of your brain. I love that. So if you couldn't practice law, what would you do, you think?
Oh, that's a great question. It's really the only job I've had as an
Yeah.
adult. Even when before I went to law school, I worked at the district attorney's office and then in another legal position. I think that being a doctor is out. I learned that in college with my organic chemistry class. What would I do? Perhaps I would try to do something. Continuing to be in the storytelling department. So maybe there's writing or editing or publishing or being a part of the book world. I still very much, I think people joke that lawyers don't have a lot of hobbies, or they don't do a lot outside of work. And that may be true for me. I have two children at home and a full-time job that's taken up the bulk of my time in the last 2 decades. But I do very much enjoy reading, and so I think to be able to find a way to make that part of my living would be really enjoyable.
Hmm. If Now going back to the law, but it's just so fascinating to me. If there was a part of a law that you could change, Just, just simple. What do you think that would be?
I think it would be more oriented on the process. I think our law, I think New York has done a good job of changing the law to accommodate the ways in which people's lives have changed. So we saw New York at the very front of same sex marriage, for example, and that was to recognize, and I'm talking particularly the law as it relates to my area of expertise. And I think it was responsive to the changing ways that people are living. New York was a little more slow to adopt no fault divorce. But we do have that now. And that was, again, a response to taking some of the heat out of the divorce. So I was glad to see that as well. So, and there have been other changes to the law, even since I've been practicing, that I think have recognized changes in the way people are living now than the way they lived 20 or 50 years ago. I would like, so I think the law itself does a good job, and the legislature does a good job of being thoughtful with respect to the law. We've had some changes to the spousal support statutes, for example, but the process is hard. The courts are overloaded. They have our judges are asked to do too much. They have too many cases before them. And so if there is a real challenge that needs to be resolved, it can be difficult to get it resolved in a timely manner. And so I think that expanding access to the courts, expanding the availability of the courts, expanding the number of judges, streamlining the judges' dockets, all of that I think would go a long way towards making the experience of getting a divorce less fraught, faster, less expensive, and especially where there are children involved, it could kind of keep the temperature down. And I think all of that would be good for the family at the end of the day.
Oh, you speak in my language, efficiency and
Yeah.
streamlining. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, who likes to protract, especially that this is very difficult as it is. So switching gears completely. So I know you love spending weekends in Connecticut. What are some of are there any family traditions, things that you like to do together, as a family, things that you look forward to?
So I would say when we're away for the weekend, one of the things we like to do is home cook our meals. And it seems really simple, but it's something that, especially during the work week, it gets short shrift. It's either something that's very quick and easy to make, or probably more ordering in than I care to mention. So when we find ourselves away for the weekend, we tend to plan our meals together. We cook them together, and it comes to take up a large portion of the day in a way that I find pleasant and relaxing, and also where we're all spending a lot of time together. I have two daughters. So when we're there, you will go to the farm stand to pick up the vegetables. And invariably, we remark on how much nicer they are than the vegetables that we can buy at the local grocery store down the block from us in Manhattan. And then we bring them home. One of my daughters has become very into making her own pasta. So
Ooh,
she will make the dough, and it's a whole production. Now, so everybody's kind of in the kitchen together at the same time and chit-chatting. And then, of course, along the way, especially with my daughters, I find when they're distracted a little bit by doing something else, cutting up the onions or kneading the pasta dough, some of the facts of their daily lives will slip out in a way that's kind of
yeah.
casual and not so heightened the way it might be if I were at home in the city and kind of grilling them about their day. And so I can learn a lot about what's been going on in their lives, but just also, you know, stuff will happen that we'll joke about the next time. So, for example, when my daughter was making the pasta, there's a roller, and the knife got caught in the roller, and it sucked up the knife, and shockingly it bent the knife into a circle. And
Oh
so
my.
this became hilarious, and we couldn't believe that it happened, and it just became like a real focal point of the
Yeah.
dinner preparation that night. And so now every time we go to use the same machine again, the same story comes out again. And I like that. I like that the stories come out from the times past where we had been doing the same thing. And that's another way that I kind of feel like we've got the opportunity to spend time together, relaxed, and again, kind of drawing out these parts of my daughter's personalities that I don't necessarily get to experience when we're all hustle and bustle, school, work, activities in the city.
No, you're right. It keeps you in the moment. That is so, I can just like transport myself to your kitchen and I too enjoy that, right? You got you're messing around. It's very sort of a light. You got the smells and it's just put a lightness. It's what's supposed to be. And that's one of the reasons why I started this podcast is to just sort of go outside of the titles and the work, what work and just leave it, outside of our homes and bring the true selves into back into our lives and just like anybody else. How would
Well, I think that's a very noble enterprise, especially because I think divorce lawyers in particular get short shrift for being regular people outside of work. So I certainly appreciate your efforts in that regard.
oh my gosh, some amazing, amazing, amazing human beings, and I'll keep this going because I actually interviewed it was Rosalia Bayamontes from Long Island.
Hmm.
They have a law firm here, and she comes from an Italian family, and so cooking that's just her way of life too. And so she was talking about it. It's part of her routine. She loves it. That's just sort of a way, not just to decompress. It's just so ingrained in her. So it's been truly wonderful to learn about everyone. How would how would your husband describe you?
So uh, look, now if you caught me at a loss
Yeah,
for words.
that would happen to
I
me
think
too.
he's got two modes of describing me. One is very kind and generous, and not dissimilar from the kind words you said at the beginning. He's very supportive of my career. He certainly would describe me as intelligent and warm and a great mother to our children. And then there's probably another side to that, which is, of course, like many couples, we have our fights. And he luckily, not luckily, he's also a lawyer. But so
Oh,
sometimes I get from him, you can take off your attorney hat and not cross examine me when
yeah.
we're having this argument. Or, I think that the nature of our practice is so often adversarial that it's hard not to bring some of that into a personal argument, whether it's with my husband or even with a friend or with my
Yeah.
children when I'm having an argument with them. So sometimes he has to remind me to take off the litigator hat and put on the regular person at home with their family hat. But I think my own experience has been that my husband and I met at law school. And I find there to be a nice understanding. The practice is not always easy, especially when it's client led, like my practice or my husband's practice as well. And so there are times when you have to do something on the weekend or miss a family event because you've got a court deadline or a judge has directed you to be somewhere, or just because of the needs of the client are particularly heightened. And certainly there's many times when the needs of my family have to come before work, and I have to do something at home and can't do something at work. But I have found that to be nice. There's an understanding there, and an understanding of the pressures of the job, an understanding of how much is expected at work. And then, of course, as you come to be a certain level of seniority, how much you want there to be expected of you. I started here as an associate where many of the things I did were things that people told me to do. And
Mm.
now I'm co chair and managing partner. And most of the things I do are things that I feel I need to do for the good of my clients and the good of the firm. It's been an interesting shift during my practice, but it's also changed the nature of the concerns, of the time, of the work. And it's nice also, my husband's career has had the same trajectory. So it's been nice to go through that journey together.
That is wonderful. Again, and it's quite human and normal the way you described it, because if you said here, it said we never argue, everything's perfect. I wouldn't think you're human. But that's funny. I'm not an attorney, and my husband is neither, but we work with attorneys. He's a forensic accountant, and it's funny when we get into arguments. I get accused of the same, not obviously because I'm in court, but because I'm curious and I love to ask questions, but I listen and I listen so keenly. It's almost like, okay, okay, no, I know I didn't say that, or maybe I did, but I'm like, I know you did because I'm curious. So, but it's important to come back to together, and like you said, is being able to, I think, having that commonality and understanding, because sometimes it is quite heavy. So having a true partner. My final question is, I'm curious, because you really have had such a long-standing career in this industry, and you evolve within a firm, and you understand the demands of today's technology and just today's world, post-COVID world, that it has on incoming attorneys. What would be your advice to incoming attorneys?
So I'll start kind of with my own experience with the younger attorneys that have joined us, which is I feel like I can learn a lot from them. I think that I my kind of initial reaction to anyone who is young or new to the profession is, you don't know what you're talking about. You don't know what you're doing. You haven't been doing this for as long as I have. And I find it a great gift to work with these young attorneys because they really force you to rethink that. They're very smart. They're very driven. They're very interested in the work, and they've got new ideas, and they've
Mm.
got it's sometimes they demand different ways of doing things, and I appreciate that by being here and being themselves and making these demands, that I am forced to rethink how things are done. Should we make changes? Let's rethink this. Do we have to do it the way that we've always done it, or is there room for change? The way my younger colleagues are suggesting there might be room for change. Sometimes the answer is yes. Sometimes the answer is no. But I
Yeah.
appreciate the opportunity to ask the question and to think about it. So I think my advice to them would be to stick with it. I think that as a young associate, often you can feel like you don't have a lot of control over your schedule or buffeted about by
Mm.
forces that are larger than you or hierarchical or, especially in a litigation field, driven by the deadlines outside of your control. But I think there are a lot of benefits to sticking with it. I think you become an expert in your area of
Mm.
practice. I think there's more and more opportunities to do the parts of practicing law that most people really enjoy, the standing up in court, the talking to opposing counsel, the deep dive on a complicated legal issue that requires a lot of legal research and a lot of writing. And there's and you will gain more and more control over your career. So I think it's still worthwhile. I welcome conversations with my younger colleagues about how we can do better, how we can make the workplace better for them. And look, they're the leaders of tomorrow.
Yeah.
It is in shocking to me to think how fast the last 20 years have gone, which means the next 20 are going to go just as quickly. And these young people are going to be the partners and the co-chair and the managing partner of this law firm. And I look forward to that.
I have goosebumps right now, because that's the first time I've interviewed many practitioners, and they have, very just great advice, something perhaps that they wish someone had told them. And first time I'm hearing it's sort of a two-way street, the learning
Yeah.
part. Same thing with our kids, right? We learn so much from them, at least I,
Yes.
I certainly have, and it never stops. Is being respectful, and accepting, and not just sort of expecting and demanding. And you're right, they are the leaders of tomorrow, and just like is the technology, and they're up to speed generally with that, and there's always so much to learn. Wow, that's a really terrific mentoring advice, Shannon. I really appreciate that. And
Thank
and
you.
thank you. Yeah, thank you for being here with us today, and sharing your story. I will definitely have you back.
Great, Denise. So that's great. And look, if I could just say also, I know you've been to the firm to teach us a little bit to be better lawyers, to help you do the work that you do. I really value the work that you do and that you contribute to our cases. It has been a pleasure working with you, getting to know you. I appreciate you having me on the podcast, and I look forward to continuing our relationship.
Oh, likewise. You have a terrific team, and I love questions. I love when someone's fired up about something, and I get to learn as well. So thank you. And to all our viewers and listeners, to find out more about Shannon Rogers Simpson and how to get a hold of her, make sure that you check her bio link below. And remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel, Beyond the Bar Podcast. Follow us on all social media channels. And until next time, stay curious and stay inspired.